Okay, sorry about that. So first, I just wanted to thank everybody for coming. I think it's really exciting to see that we have people actually from 3 states. We have people from Illinois, Wisconsin, and also I saw a couple people there from Minnesota. So thanks everybody for dropping in. So as John said, tonight I'm going to be talking about the Botanical Foray. As he mentioned, we started this in 2018, and we're going to be having our 4th foray this year in 2022. So in my talk, I'm just going to start out by talking about exactly what a foray is, or at least our concept of a foray, because there are actually different definitions of what a foray is out there, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Then I'll talk about why we do a foray and why I think it's important. And then I will talk about some of the past forays that we've done and the results that we've had from those. And then I'll talk about our upcoming foray and where that's going to be this year. So as I mentioned, there are some kind of different definitions of a foray out there. And so some of you might be familiar with the Michigan Botanical Club's foray. And I attended this in 2019. And so it's a little bit different than ours. So what they do is they go out during the day for field trips, and then they come back in the evening and they actually have kind of a big dinner. And then during the dinner, they have a series of presentations by different speakers. So it's a really nice event, but it's pretty different from what we do. I looked up the definition of foray in the dictionary, and so I found that there were actually 2 different definitions. So one of them is a brief excursion or a short visit, especially for a particular purpose, and the other is an attack or raid for plunder. And I think that both of these actually fit what we do very well. So the first, so the first definition, a brief excursion or short visit, especially for a particular purpose. So this describes pretty much exactly what we do. So each day during a foray, we go and we visit different natural areas, and we hike around and look around, and we have a particular purpose, and that purpose is to collect plant specimens. So here you can see we're collecting plant specimens. And then the second part of this, an attack or raid for plunder, is also very appropriate because that's what we do as well. We're out there, we're digging things up, we're cutting off branches, we're gathering up as much as we can in the day, and we're carrying it out. And then we bring it back to our headquarters or our base camp, and that's our plunder. So, and each year we've been getting more and more plunder, as you'll see. Okay, so our definition of a foray is a multi-day event that brings together both amateur and professional botanists to collect voucher specimens in areas that are under-collected. And so what I mean by under-collected is that they're just not well represented by specimens in an herbarium. So I didn't come up with the idea of a foray, and actually I think it started with people that were looking for mushrooms. So there's quite a few mycological societies out there that have been having these forays for decades, where they go out and they collect mushrooms. And I just found this site a couple of days ago after I came up with my definitions, and you can see they actually have pretty much the same definition that I had. So they say a foray is a quick raid, usually for the purpose of taking plunder. Now there is one difference. So there's one line here that I really like. So they said, on overnight forays, some of the plunder is typically cooked in delicious dishes for all to share. So we haven't actually tried that yet with our plunder, but maybe we should. There's definitely edibles out there. Chris, no, maybe I'll put you in charge of that. So the first botanical foray that was collecting vascular plants that I know of was started in Washington State, and this was started by Dick Olmsted at the University of Washington Herbarium. And I actually saw a presentation that he gave about forays a few years ago at the botanical meetings, and then I talked to him afterwards about it and about his reasons for starting it. So he said that his reasons for starting it were, first of all, just to grow the collection, because there wasn't a lot of activity at the Washington Herbarium when he started there back in 1996. Also, he just wanted to increase information about plant distributions throughout the state. He wanted to get baseline data for climate change studies, because this was really when climate change was really starting to become an issue and a buzzword. They were also working on a revision of the flora of the Pacific Northwest, so they wanted more specimens to inform this revision. And he also just wanted to build support and a community around the herbarium, and then to establish connections with regional botanists that were working out in the Pacific Northwest. So those seem like a lot of good reasons. His concept of a foray actually spread to neighboring Idaho in 2008. So Jim Smith at Boise State University, who is a colleague of mine and works on the Lomation project with me, he started foray there in 2008. And so I and Brenda actually went out and joined this foray in 2018. And this was in the first week of June in 2018, and I thought, oh, I thought this was such a great event that immediately I wanted to have one here. So I came back and immediately started planning the foray. Let's see. So the first foray was actually at Crex Meadows and took place in 2018, and it was a joint event, so I immediately got the Botanical Club involved, because I thought that would be a great activity for the Botanical Club. And I have to have a shout out here to Paul Helena, because he and Derek Anderson and some others were working on a project up there already and had been doing some work at Crex and Fish Meadows and some other areas up there. And so he had connections up there, and we were able to get the Crex Meadows Outdoor Education Camp to be our headquarters that year. So that helped out a lot with planning that event. So when I started, I had similar objectives to those that Dick Olmsted had, but I had a few others. So one thing, in addition to adding more collections to the herbarium, I also wanted to just kind of actively stem the decline in plant collecting. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. And then also wanted to fill gaps in our knowledge of the current status and distribution of plants throughout the state of Wisconsin. Because although we know a lot about the flora here, there are some definite gaps as well. And I also wanted to counteract the bias that is known to occur in plant collecting. And I'll also touch on that in a little bit. And then just to provide a fun and educational activity for the club. So I mentioned the decline in plant collecting. So there was a study that was done in 2014, or no, 2004 actually, that looked at plant collecting in the United States. And they saw that there was a definite decline through the decades. So here they looked at herbaria throughout the Great Lakes region. So Wisconsin was part of this study. And they saw that plant collecting like steadily increased up until there was a nice peak here in the 50s and 60s, But then after that, it just steadily declined, and it has continued to decline since that time. Oh, there we go. And it's continued to decline. Then the graph below shows collecting in the Northeast, and they peaked earlier in the early 1900s, and then they experienced a pretty steady decline. So there's been less plant collecting in recent decades. So the authors felt that this is a problem because our knowledge of our flora in the US is far from complete, and also the flora is constantly changing. So we have a lot of new things coming in, so new non-natives, new invasive species going into different areas. And then we also have distributions changing now due to climate change. So things are changing, so we need to keep up and continue to collect plants. And so they felt like if this decline continues, then studies on all aspects of biodiversity were compromised. There's another study that was done more recently in 2017 that looked at biases in plant collecting. And so they were able to do this study because of all the digitization of plant specimens that has been going on. So people have been databasing and imaging all of the specimens in the herbaria, and now we're able to look at this data and get a lot of valuable information. So they looked at this data and they asked, are specimens being collected randomly, or are there biases in the way specimens are collected? And so they looked at data from 3 areas: Australia, South Africa, and New England. And so the map here at the top, it shows the activity of the collecting activity of herbaria. So where herbaria had done more collections is the orange, and where there's less collecting is the blue. And also you can see here that there's these lines. So these actually represent roads. And then here we have like cities along the coast or where there might be herbaria. And you can see this trend in all 3 areas. So they found that there tend to be more collections along roads and also near cities, especially that have institutions with herbaria. So not really a surprise, but they were able to document that and show that clearly. So they also mapped areas that they called areas of excessive collecting, or hotspots shown in red, and then areas where they felt like there was insufficient collecting, which are here in blue. This actually made me really want to go to Maine and do some collecting, because there's huge areas of Maine that obviously there's been very little collected from. They also looked at other types of biases. So they looked at trait biases. And I'm just going to talk about the results from New England here, since that's more closely related to us. So they found that perennials were collected more frequently than annuals. They found that herbs and trees were collected more than graminoids. So people were avoiding maybe grasses and sedges. They also found that short to medium height plants were collected more than really tall or bulky specimens, which, no surprise, I guess it's just easier to collect smaller things. And they found that there tend to be a lot fewer collections of things that flower early or flower late. So a lot of the collecting was just being done in the middle of the season and not at the ends. So a lot of different biases were found. And then finally, they looked at collector bias. And so they found that a large percentage of specimens were actually collected by one or a few collectors. And so in New England, they found that over 50% of the specimens were actually only collected by 3% of the collectors, and that there were just a few very prolific collectors, for example, Fernald, shown here, who like collected just thousands and thousands of specimens. So their habits and their preferences affected what was collected. So maybe a taxonomy group that they were interested in or a certain area that they like to visit would get collected more often. And I think that that's true here in our herbarium as well, because I know myself, I like to go out and collect Apiaceae. I also really like peatlands, so I'll collect more in like bogs and fens. And I know like John Zaborski that works here, he's like really fascinated with the little weedy invasives that are coming into the state. So he's more likely to collect like in parking lots and roads and things like that to get those things. So definitely, I think all collectors kind of have their own personal biases. Oh, I also wanted to say, I really like this picture, and I think it shows some really practical advice. So you can see if you're out and you're collecting plants and you forgot to bring your bag with you, you can just stuff them down your shirt and then you can just take them back like that. Okay, so back to my objectives, our objectives in doing the foray. I think the first one we just meet by virtue of just doing a foray. So just by doing a foray, we're adding more recent collections and we're stemming the decline in plant collecting. The second thing here, filling gaps in our knowledge, that takes a little more planning. And so the way we can do that is to kind of strategically target under-collected areas. So, and to do this, we can utilize the digitized data that we have. So we have this consortium of Wisconsin Herbaria where we have a lot of digitized specimen data, and we can use that to kind of decide where we want to go. And where are the places that have been under-collected. So this is just a map that shows like all the specimen records that have been geo-referenced, so that have a latitude, longitude associated with them, are mapped here on this map of Wisconsin. And you can see the darker areas are where there's a lot of collections, and then the lighter areas are where there's no or just a few collections. And you can see like near Madison and then up in Stevens Point, you can see there's quite a few collections. And then other areas of the state, there's just not much collected at all. Some of this may be that it hasn't been digitized yet, but I think some of it does actually reflect that just those parts of the state are less collected. So we can use this data, and also we can also calculate like the percent of taxa that were collected in each county. So the percent of taxa like for the whole state that were collected in each county. And again, you see down here like Dane County, Sauk County, a really high percentage of the flora has been collected. And then other counties, other counties less have been collected. So yeah. So whereas Dane County has like 63%, Iron County only has 27%, and then Vernon County, where we're going to be going, only has 30% of the taxa in the state collected from that county. Okay, and so this shows kind of where we've gone, and also the arrows in black are where we've been, and then the arrow in blue is where we're going to go this year. So you can see up by Iron County, that most northern county, that there's kind of a white spot here. So a light spot, so there wasn't a lot collected there. The same over here in Burnett County and Creeks Meadows. And then also down here in western or eastern Eau Claire County and Jackson County. And now down here in Vernon County, there's kind of that big white spot, which indicates there's not a lot of collections, and they all have around 30% or less taxa collected. So these seem like good places for us to collect from. Okay, so then that's how we address that objective. And then the third objective, counteract the bias in plant collecting. So the way that we can counteract that is just that we have all these different biases. To counteract those, we just need to collect everything and anything when we're out there. So when we have a foray, I always tell the groups when they go out, you know, just collect anything and everything that you see flowering or fruiting. And in that way, we can overcome that bias. Just don't allow yourself to be biased, just collect it. And one caveat is rare plants. So with rare plants, there's always the option to just photograph it and document it that way. So we can have photo vouchers for things that are rare. Okay, so now I'm just going to talk a little bit about the logistics of the foray and kind of how we run it during the foray. So once we've kind of picked out the part of the state that we want to go to, the next step is to find a place to have our headquarters. And so, as I mentioned, Craigs Meadows, we use the Outdoor Education Center. They allowed us to use cabins and bunkhouse, and that was really nice. The next year, we stayed at Trout Lake Biological Station. This past year, which is this picture here over on the right, we stayed at what is it? Black River State Park in the East Fork Indoor-Outdoor Group Campsite. That was really nice. And then this year, we're going to be at the Sidey Hollow Campground that's in Vernon County Park. So the next step then, we have the headquarters, we know we're going to go, then we just have to start advertising, sending out some emails. And I'll be sending out an email this week or maybe early next week to get people to RSVP so we can start getting a head count and figure out how many people are going to be coming this year. And also, obviously, this talk is also advertising the foray and trying to convince you all to come and join us. So the foray typically starts on a Thursday evening. People will come up and then we'll spend Friday and Saturday all day collecting, and then we'll drive back home on Sunday. So we'll meet up on Friday morning and we'll make a plan of where to go. And we have maps, and we'll break into groups, and then I give each group some maps to take out with them. And usually I go up or take Mark with me and a couple people, and we'll go up like a week or two ahead of time, and we're trying to scout out like where people can park and things like that. And so I'll give you all that information to you and your group, and then I'll send you out on your way to start collecting. So like I said, we break up into groups of like 4 or 5. And so everybody will have like a different role. One person will be in charge and will be keeping the notes and taking all the information that we'll need for the labels. Another person will be pressing, or maybe 2 people. Somebody will be digging up plants. Somebody else might just be taking photographs. So everybody will be pitching in and having a different job to do. And we'll spend the day doing that. We always like to have a group that goes out on the water. There's so many lakes and rivers here in Wisconsin that it's important to go out there and document that as well. And I always like to do that part. I always find it fun to go out on the water during the day. So we just have groups spread out all over. We take out these day presses with us, and we do press right in the field. I just like to do it that way because I feel like the specimens end up looking nicer. If you shove them in a plastic bag, then they can lose their flower parts and their leaves become wrinkled. And also it saves a lot of time when we get back, because we don't want to have to be working late into the night, like taking plants out of plastic bags and pressing them. It's a lot easier when we can just go back, and then we just have to transfer the sheets right from the field presses into the day presses. And sometimes with the aquatic plants, there's a little bit more work involved, like maybe floating out some of the aquatic plants and that kind of thing. But generally, we go back to camp maybe around 4 o'clock or so, and generally we're done by about 6 o'clock, and then we can just enjoy the evening. So of course, after we collect all the plants, we have to take our obligatory picture with our plunder. And so this was the first one, that's our second one, and that is the third one. And you can see like each year how we increase not only the number of people, but also the number of plants that we're collecting. So we have steadily increased both the participation and the number of plants that we've collected. So, although, yeah, anyway, I'm not sure I want to increase too much more, but it's great to have that many plants. So the last objective was simply to provide a fun and educational activity for the club. And if you look at the smiling faces on all these pictures, you can't deny that these people are out there having a lot of fun. And even this group over here that with their mosquito nets, so out all day battling the mosquitoes, and yet they're still smiling. Also, after we're done processing the specimens, it's a great time just to hang out with other botanists and other plant enthusiasts, and just hang out by the fire. And you might even get treated to a really nice meteor shower like we did last year, which was really amazing. For those that were there on Thursday night, we just had the most amazing meteor shower. So after we come back, we have to take everything back to the herbarium. We have to process it, we have to dry it. And then during the winter, we typically have 2 foray verification processing workshops. And so we've had 2 of these every year so far. They've all been well attended. As you can see, it's been really helpful. And I just want to thank everyone out there that was able to attend one of these. I know some of you came to multiple ones, and yeah, it's really helpful because, you know, the herbarium staff here, like if we had to process all this on our own, it would really be overwhelming. So it's been great to have your help. I just want to talk a little bit about the results from the first 2 forays. The first one in Burnett County, that's the Crux Meadows. Before we did the foray, we had 2,803 specimens that were on the consortium, the Wisconsin Consortium of Herbaria. We collected 559 foray specimens that was 312 different species. So that increased the number of specimens that we had from Burnett County by 20%. And then the following year in Iron County, we started out with just about 1,900 specimens in the consortium. We added 573, which was 290 different species. And so that increased the number of specimens we had from Iron County by almost 30%. Every year we get a number of county records. So we also increased the number of known species for the county. These are some that we had in Iron County in 2019. As you can see, it's interesting. Some of these are from like the more difficult groups, like the sedges, rubus, yeah, and willows also can be difficult to identify. But these were records that we added, county records that we added in 2019. We also, every year, we add like new records for rare species. So we find new populations of rare species. These are a couple that we found also in Iron County. Or actually, this might have been Vilas. It was right on the edge. So we have Rhynchospora fusca and then Eleochris flavescens. So we found some new populations of those that year. And the results for 2021, so that's still a work in progress. We're still working on finishing up the verifications on those. So, but we know that we far exceeded what we had collected in years previous. So we had over 900 vascular plant specimens this year. And also for the first time, we had collections of mosses and lichens. So we had one person that was out there collecting those for us, and she was able to collect almost 100 specimens of those. So that's really great as well. Okay, so here we have the Wisconsin almost annual Botanical Foray. And yes, unfortunately, we weren't able to do it in 2020 due to COVID, but we hope to continue now every year if possible. So, and every year so far, we've been moving to a different ecological landscape in the state of Wisconsin. We've also had 2 forays that were north of the detention zone, and now after this year, we'll have 2 forays that are south of the detention zone. So we're really kind of hitting up a diverse areas. So the first one was in the Northwest Sands. Then we were in the Northern Highlands. And then we were in the Central Sands. And this year we're going to be in the Western Coulees and Ridges. So, and we're going to be primarily in Vernon County, but we're also going to get in a little bit into Crawford County. So this area, the Western Coulees and Ridges ecological landscape, is a really interesting area. So it's in the driftless region. So it was not covered with ice in the last glaciation. And because of that, it has really interesting topography. It has highly eroded topography with very steep-sided valleys and very high ridges. There's quite a few high gradient headwater streams, large rivers, and that leads to a complex of various floodplains and terraces. There's also some sand dunes along some of the terraces along the Mississippi and Wisconsin rivers. So it's a very diverse habitat. And there's a lot of different types of vegetative communities can be found here. We have oak hickory forest is one of the primary communities we'll come across. There's also more mesic maple basswood forest, and then also bottomland hardwoods. There's also some really nice relic conifer forests. And so these consist of hemlock, white pine, yellow birch. And these are found in like your more moist, cool areas, like deep ravines and such. And then on dry rocky bluffs, there's some red and white pines. And then on some of the steeper south-facing slopes, there's some prairie remnants. So we have just a really incredible diversity of habitats that we're going to be able to visit during this year's foray. This just shows the land. This is a land cover map from the 1880s, so prior to European settlement. So you can, I just wanted to show this, just you can see all these different colors, so you can see that there's like a really diversity of different habitats. So yeah, so the yellow is prairie, the orange are like oak openings, so like oak savannas, and then this kind of greenish color is like oak forest. And then that pink is more mesic forest, sugar maple basswood forest. So that shows, also just demonstrates the real diversity of habitats that are in this area. Okay, so now I just want to talk a little bit about where we're going to be staying. We're going to stay at Sidey Hollow County Park in the campground. And I went and visited there last week and just took some pictures. Obviously, the trees will be leafed out. Well, hopefully the trees will be leafed out by the time we're there. I mean, who knows the way things are going. But we've rented 5 campsites in a fairly large area here. This is a map of the campground, and we're going to be down at the bottom here at the end where it's 41 through 45 are the campsites that we've rented. We also have the option to get the 75 through 78, which are on the other side of the creek, if we need more space. But it is a pretty big area, and they said we could put up as many tents there as we wanted. We also rented this shelter, which is adjacent to the campsite, so they're all very close by. And this has a lot of picnic tables. It has electric outlets that we can use, and all that. So so this is going to be a little bit different than previous years. Let's go back to this one. So like last year, you know, for those of you that were there, we were pretty much had our own space. We were pretty isolated. But this one's going to be a little different because it's part of a larger campground. So there's going to be more people there. But I kind of see this as an opportunity for outreach as well. And thanks to David Egan, if you're out there, for bringing that up in your email the other day, like on Saturday, after, you know, we've gone out and collected on Friday, and then Saturday we're going to have all the presses and everything there. It'd be nice to actually have a couple people maybe stay behind on Saturday and to kind of field questions from the public, and maybe have some information both about the herbarium and the club available, and turn this into a little bit of an outreach opportunity, since we are going to be in kind of a public area. Okay, and as far as like where we're going to collect, this is just a list of some of the natural areas that I'm hoping for us to visit. And these are in both Vernon, and also a couple of them are in Crawford County. And so you can see by the habitats that I have listed here that we're going to be going to a lot of different places. We have dry prairie, we have sandstone outcrops, rocky dolomite outcrops, oak savannas. We had this really cool sandstone cliffs and seepages that we'll see at Tunnelville Cliffs, and also potentially some pine and hemlock relics. So just, and there's also some kind of somewhat extensive like floodplain wetlands that we might also get into. And then now I just want to talk about just a couple of the sites that we're going to visit. I'm not going to go into detail about all the sites, but I'll just touch on a couple. Tunnelville Cliffs is one I'm pretty excited about. It's a really large area. It's about 1,300 acres. It has 3 different access points. So we may be sending like 3 different teams there. It has a pretty large area down here in the southeast that is right along the Kickapoo River. If you look here, this kind of shows better the topography. You can see the ridge lines. So there's like some open grassy areas, but then there's also some steep slopes and high ridges. And then there's kind of this wetland area near the Kickapoo River. So a lot of different things to see there. So this shows the cliffs. That's the name, Tunnelville Cliffs. Here's like a moist cliff seepage area, and then one of the grasslands there. There's also a diversity of woodlands. So there's oak woodland on the ridgetop, on the slopes, and then here's some of the more mesic bottomland woods shown in these 2 pictures. So a lot of different woodland types that we're going to be visiting. Also, we could potentially see some really interesting rare plants. So some of these, the first one is the bird's eye primrose, and then we have the northern monkshood. This is the bird's eye primrose. And then one that I really want to see that I've never seen, but I'm really interested in, is this Adoxa or muskroot. So I'm kind of hoping we should be there about the right time to see that. All of these occur kind of on those moist cliff areas. And then there's also this Terex porcina, which occurs in like the deep shaded ravines. And that's one I'm familiar with from Illinois. So some really interesting plants that we might have an opportunity to see. Another area that we're going to be going is Battle Bluff Prairie. And so this one's going to offer some really great views of the Mississippi River floodplain. And it's got some really nice dry prairie and oak savannas. This kind of gives you a sense of it's going to be a little bit topographically challenging. So there's going to be some really steep slopes to be climbing up to get up top to get to the prairies. And this map shows where the DNR is actually doing some management. So they're managing to increase the amount of the prairie remnant and the oak woodland and oak openings at this property. And there's also a number of rare plants here that we might have the opportunity to see. One is the Orobonchi fasciculata, which is a little parasitic plant. This one is the perplexed tick trefoil. And then we also have the purple milkweed. So the purple milkweed and the tick trefoil tend to be in like oak openings or in the edge of oak forests. Then we have the purple stem cliff break, the fern there on the end, and that occurs on cliffs, dolomite cliffs, and bedrock cliffs along the Mississippi, which is exactly where we'll be. And then finally, the one down on the bottom is the Scutellaria or skullcap, and that occurs in more mesic to dry forests. Okay, so this last, just one more site that I want to talk about that I'm pretty excited about. And so for multiple reasons, not just because we're going there, but just that it exists at all, I guess. This is, I don't know, some of you might have seen this announcement recently. So this is a really recent announcement. This is dated April 19th, 2022. So the Mississippi Valley Conservancy, which owns quite a bit of property in the Mississippi area, Mississippi River area, is anyway, they recently purchased this 1,600 acre area right along the Kickapoo River. So, and they were able to do this because of a single donor who gave, an anonymous donor that gave them $3 million. So, and I've been in contact with the Mississippi Valley Conservancy because they also own the Tunnelville Cliffs and some of the other natural areas in Vernon and Crawford counties. But they're excited about us visiting their properties and doing collecting. They're totally on board with that. So, so this is one that we'll visit, and yeah, so this just shows the extent of the property, and this shows kind of an oxbow there that's on the property along the Kickapoo. And you can see, I mean, some of it is, I mean, it is private, was a working farm. There's also cattle. So there is farmland and there is some pasture, but there's also quite a bit of woodland and forest. So I think that potentially there's some really nice things there. There's also 5 miles along the Kickapoo River. So there should be some really interesting stuff. And also because it was private, it hasn't been collected at all. So it should, you know, we'll be adding, everything we collect will be like a new collection from that area. Okay, I just want to end by saying, you know, I really believe that plant collecting is more important now than ever. And there's a lot of reasons for this. You know, our world is changing. So we need to catalog what's out there before it's too late. And we need to keep track of things because things are changing. You know, new species are coming in. species distributions are changing. Also, it's important to have like newer collections so that we can use them like for phylogenetics or phylogenomics in order to extract DNA and to look at, discover new species, look at evolutionary relationships. We need to be able to do that. Also, because of digitization, we can do more than ever with this specimens. We can ask lots of different questions about species, like species niche modeling, changes of distributions, movement of invasives into an area, so all that kind of stuff. And then also, we can use that data to see trends and biases and gaps in collecting and to help us to make smarter decisions about where and what to collect. So I hope that I've convinced you, or at least intrigued you a little bit, to come and join us in our little attack or plunder, and that you'll join us in Sidey Hollow on June 2nd to 5th this year. And then finally, I just wanted to end by thanking all of the people whose photographs I used for this talk. There are many of you who took photographs during the forays that I used. So thanks to all of you. And with that, I will take questions. Thank you.
Hey, Mary Ann.
Yeah.
This is James.
Hey.
I don't have a question, but I just want to point out that this is open to non-botanists and people that are just interested in plants should join us also.
Yes, definitely. Yes, it's open to the public. Yeah, you don't have to be a botanist. There's things that, we have things that everyone can do. So yeah, anybody can come. Oh, stop. Okay.
Mary Ann, I got a question related to collecting and stuff. This is Susan, by the way.
Yeah.
So what's your feeling about stuff like the crowdsourcing platforms like iNaturalist and using that in lieu of, or I guess using photography for plants rather than straight collecting?
Well, I think that iNaturalist and photographing, I think it definitely has its place. And I think, the good thing about it is that, a lot more people can do it and we can get a lot more information. And actually, like in a talk that I gave to the Michigan Botanical Club where I was talking about this, I gave an example of this Phytolacca acinosa that occurs around here in Madison, around the lake. And I think like in the herbarium, we had like maybe 2 collections. So we knew of like 2 sites, but then on iNaturalist, there were like a bunch more sites. So so that really, so it could really inform, although there were a lot of mis-IDs, but John cleared those up. So, so I think iNaturalist and things like that can really be useful and helpful. I still think that it's important to collect because, well, as I mentioned, some of the uses for plants, like doing phylogenetics or phylogenomics, which I think is important and can lead to like species discovery and things like that. And I use specimens all the time in my research, both for DNA and also for morphology. So, so they're really important for that. Also, just to have that permanent record where, photographs of a lot of things, like you can identify them conclusively, but not always. So I think it's important to have the actual specimens as well, because that you know what those are for sure. Yeah. So yeah. And I don't know if anyone else has more to add on that topic, feel free to jump in. There's a question in the chat. Question.
I'll jump in real quick just on that comment. I'll give you an example of two ferns, Dryopteris carthusiana and Dryopteris intermedia. Unless the person gives a photograph of a specific part of that fern, you're not going to know what it is. You're just going to know it's Dryopteris. With having both specimens in hand, you can look at it closer, and there are so many examples of that happening with really closely related species where you really can't just do it with a photograph. But I'm also an avid collector too, and in a camp of, yeah, we need to collect in these underrepresented areas. So I'm probably one of those biased collectors too. So.
Thanks, Paul.
Marianne, I'll make an addition too about the use of iNaturalist. I published a paper with a co-author last year on a species of Dicanthelium, and we looked at herbarium records, DNR records, as well as iNaturalist, and we found there was a few good records for this rare species. It's from the Northeast New England area, but we did end up having to follow up, or we had a scoring plan for each image that we had, and basically tried to rank whether we could justify an ID based on that. So it was useful, but yeah, there was definitely a lot of follow-up work and a lot of mis-ID'd grasses, which is not unrealistic, but it just depends on the species, like everyone's saying.
Yeah, thank you. Also, I like studies. I know there's studies where like people are counting stomata and correlating that to like the amount of CO2 that was in the air at certain times. So like across time, by just counting stomata, they can determine what concentrations of CO2 were in the air. So something like that you couldn't do from a picture. And I think there's probably a lot of other uses you could think of that, like maybe you can't do from a picture, but you actually need the physical specimen. So who's coming to the fray this year? Hey.
I am.
Yeah, Marianne, this is Kevin. That brings up, that makes me think, is there a limited number of people that can participate in the foray this year?
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, it's not an issue. It hasn't really come up yet, but I guess there's potential. I mean, that's why I know I need to send out an email soon and start to get the RSVP count and see, because I mean, I think this past year at like 900 specimens, that it really did, it was kind of starting to tax like what we could handle as far as when we brought them back, and we have a limited number of dryers, and like what we could get in the dryers quick enough to make sure things got dried before it, before, you know, they started to get moldy or something. So there probably is a limited number of specimens we can handle, unless we can kind of enlist maybe other herbaria to help us out. Yeah, and then, yeah, at some point, I mean, we have the 5 campsites. We have kind of this option of having 4 more campsites, but you know, that will limit it. So yeah, we'll just have to see how many people respond and kind of go from there, I guess. So yeah, once I send out the email about RSVPing, yeah, please let me know as soon as possible if you plan to attend, so we can plan accordingly. And if you're not a member of the club, become a member of the club so you can get the emails.
Oh yeah, what's the club, Marianne?
The Botanical Club of Wisconsin. Yeah, you can Google it. We have a nice webpage now, thanks to Chris Knoll, who updated that for us recently.
Marianne, you might also point out that people don't have to come both days. They can free to come one day or just part of a day.
Yeah, so yeah, if you live close by and you know you just want to drive up for a day, you know, we definitely had people do that last year, where they just came for a day. And yeah, so definitely that's an option.
Any chance we're gonna have annual memorial T-shirts available?
I don't know, maybe that's something the club should do as a fundraiser. We'll have to talk about that. Yeah. Are you
If
bringing?
anyone has a t-shirt design, they should, I don't know, get in touch. Any t-shirt designers?
Yeah. So. Anything else? All right, any other questions before we wrap up?
Thanks, Marianne. I'm getting excited for it.
Yeah, I can't believe it's only like a month away, so just over a month. So,
Thanks for the presentation. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed it. I wish I could come this year, but it's
yeah,
not gonna work out. Next year.
okay. Yeah, we'll be doing it again. Yeah, and if people have ideas, throw ideas at me about where you might want to do it next year. I'm open to suggestions. All right, well, thanks everyone, and yeah, we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
All right.